now it's me.
Well, hello there, child. Have you been to Mass lately?
Yes, Grandpa, but it confused me.
Confused you? By Jove, how did it happen?
I sort of got the picture, but how did it all come about?
Well, it all started way back when. Christ had recently died on the cross, and he had many followers in the Holy Land, but few elsewhere. In 32 or 36 AD, Saul of Tarsus was trotting down the road to Damascus when he had his conversion, as you know. Within a decade, he began 3 missionary journeys to spread the good news. He traveled first throughout Galatia. He started in Antioch of Syria, visited 10 cities, and was nearly killed in the town of Lystra. Then he returned home to Antioch. His second journey was to Greece, hitting 13 cities on the way. Then he returned home to Antioch. His third journey was back to Greece and Asia Minor through around 11 towns, terminating in Jerusalem. In 60 AD, Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, and in 67 AD, he was martyred in Rome. Moving on. Yes. During the rise of Christianity, the Roman Empire was at its peak of power. Unlike most religions in the Roman Empire, Christianity required its adherents to renounce all other gods. Christians' refusal to join the Roman pagan celebrations meant they were unable to participate in much of public life. This caused non-Christians, including government authorities, to fear that the Christians were angering Rome's gods and thereby threatening the peace and prosperity of the empire. Thenceforth, from the year AD 64 to sometime in AD 250, the Christian religion grew despite the Roman government's persecution of them, until the Edict of Milan was issued in 313 AD by Emperor Constantine, the first Roman leader to convert to Christianity, legalizing Christianity within the empire. On to the apologist. The early apologists sought to provide rational explanations to those who do not fully quite understand how the church believed. Irenaeus defied human progress as seen through God's plan, Clement of Alexandria connected Christian to Greek philosophy, Tertullian proclaimed that everything that was not explicitly Christian was a sin and heresy, and Origen sought to explain Christian doctrine to pagans. The Crusades were a series of religious expeditionary wars blessed by Pope Urban II and the Catholic Church, with the stated goal of restoring Christian access to the holy places in and about Jerusalem from Muslim control. Jerusalem was and is a sacred city and symbol of all 3 major Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There were 23 crusades between the years 1095 and 1272. The first few crusades were successful, but their success rate gradually decreased over the decades.
What happens next? Grandpa, what happens next?
Behind me! Ah, yes. Where were we? So, moving on. Charlemagne was the king of the Franks from 768, the king of Italy from 774, and the first Roman emperor in the Western Europe since the collapse of the Western Roman Empire 3 centuries earlier. Through his military conquests, he subdued the Saxons and Bavarians, pushed his frontier into Spain. He expanded his kingdom into an empire that incorporated much of Western and Central Europe. Charlemagne continued his follower's policy towards the papacy and became its protector. For his role in uniting Europe for the first time since the days of the Roman Empire, he was crowned by Pope Leo III, King of the Romans, on December 25th, 800 AD. The Protestant Reformation was the 16th century schism between Western Christianity initiated by Martin Luther, John Calvin, and other early Protestants. It was sparked by the 1517 poster of Luther's 95 Theses. the effort of the self-described reformers who protested, the doctrines, rituals, and ecclesiastical structure of the Roman Catholic Church led to the creation of new national Protestant churches. The Reformation was precipitated by earlier events within Europe, such as the Black Death and Western Schism, which eroded people's faith in the Catholic Church and the papacy that governed it. Fast forward about 350 years, and Pope Pius IV is calling the first ecumenical council since the Council of Trent. The council was convoked to deal with the contemporary problems of the rising influence of rationalism, liberalism, and materialism. Its purpose was, besides this, to define the Catholic doctrine concerning the Church of Christ. There was discussion and approval of only two constitutions, the dogmatic constitution on the Catholic faith and the first dogmatic constitution on the Church of Christ, the latter dealing with the primacy and infallibility of the Bishop of Rome. The Industrial Revolution of the 19th century marked a major turning point in history. Almost every aspect of daily life was influenced in some way, but at a cost of economic ethics. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII set out the Catholic Church's response to the social conflict that had risen in the wake of industrialization and that had led to the rise of socialism. On May 15th, he issued Rerum Novarum, an encyclical guide to practical economics and moral guidelines for industries. They catalyzed current labor and working condition laws that are enforced in many countries today. The Second Vatican Council addressed relations between the Roman Catholic Church and the modern world. It was convoked by Pope John XXIII in 1962. In 1963, he died slowly and tragically of stomach cancer, and Pope Paul VI took over until the council adjourned in 1965. The council called between 2,000 and 2,500 bishops and thousands of observers, auditors, sisters, laymen, and laywomen to 4 sessions at St. Peter's Basilica between 1962 and 1965. Cultural changes lay in the aftermath of World War II spelled a need to reconsider church practices. These meetings did just that. 16 total documents came out of it, laying a foundation for the church as we know it today. Pope John Paul II is hands down one of the world's favorite popes. He was born Karol Józef Wojtyła on May 18, 1920 in Wadowice, Poland. He was ordained in 1946, became the Bishop of Ombie in 1958, and became the Archbishop of Krakow in 1964. He was made a cardinal by Pope Paul VI in 1967, and in 1978 became the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years. There were multiple attempts on his life, and when his would-be assassins were captured, he forgave them. He was the vocal advocate for human rights and used his influence to vastly affect political change. He is also a Harlem Globetrotter. Pope Benedict XVI was born in Germany and grew up under war reparations from World War I and as the Nazi regime was gaining power. He was briefly a member of the Hitler Youth in his early teens after membership became mandatory in 1941. He turned to theological studies after the war, helping found the influential journal Communio. He was elevated to the papacy in 2005, succeeding Pope John Paul II. And so that's the history of the church so far.
Wow, Grandpa, what do you think might come next?